All right, ladies and gentlemen, MrSotko here. Welcome back to the channel. Got a whole bunch of good news stuff for you today, but before we get into that, I want to talk about the price. And we have reached $4,000 once again for probably the 20th time in history, but for who knows how long this time. We bottomed out at some 3,400 in certain exchanges, and we're at a market cap of 129 billion. Interestingly enough, Bitcoin dominance is actually going up a little bit. It's at 54%. So that means that a lot of alts have gone down significantly more than Bitcoin, but that's been kind of the MO almost all year. So let me show you this real quick. There is going to be another CBOE futures expiration on the 19th of December. And if you remember the video that I made a little while back, the expiration was on 11/14, and that also coincided with the Bitcoin Cash hash wars as well. And that was the exact day that we saw a massive drop in Bitcoin price recently. So there may likely be another one on the 19th of December. So I feel that this bear market is not over yet. A lot of people feel the same, so it's no prediction, but I don't feel it's over yet. So we have the holidays, which usually goes down in price. There may be a slight increase until we get to that period of about the 19th of December, which I feel is going to be the dipping point of the year. And then, of course, we have January and February, which are never very good months for crypto. So this isn't over yet, and the prices are still going to go lower. So I would normally like to say, hey, now is probably a good time to buy. But you know what? I think I might have to hold off on saying that because it might not be the best time to buy just yet. So let's get into some of the news. So Snowden, a large population believes in Bitcoin as a means of exchange. So famed whistleblower Edward Snowden recently spoke in favor of Bitcoin's capacity, which he's been talking about for a while. But Snowden describes a distributed ledger technology as compromising a new kind of database in which history can't be manipulated, which Snowden also argues compromises the fundamental intrinsic value underpinning Bitcoin. Snowden stated that, imagine that today, instead of today's world where publicly important data is often held exclusively at Generic Corp LLC, which can and does play God with it at the public's expense, it's in 1,000 places with 100 jurisdictions. There is no takedown mechanism or other let's be evil button, and creating one requires a global consensus of generally at least 51% of the network in support of changing the rule. So Snowden gave a critical appraisal of the value ascribed to fiat currency, stating, "What makes a little piece of green paper worth anything? If you're not cynical enough to say men with guns, which are the reason legal tender is treated different from monopoly money, you're talking about scarcity and shared belief in the usefulness of the currency as a store of value or means of exchange." On the subject of gold, the former CIA employee, which is actually NSA employee, asserts that the precious metal is worth so much more than its limited but real practical uses in industry because people generally agree it's worth more than its practical value. Like gold, Snowden asserts that cryptocurrencies have very limited fundamental value, adding, "At most, it's a token that lets you save data onto the blocks of their respective blockchains, forcing everybody participating in that blockchain to keep a copy of it for you." Ultimately, Snowden argues that the only thing that gives cryptocurrencies value is the belief of a large population in their usefulness as a means of exchange, adding, "As long as there are people out there who want to be able to move money without banks, cryptocurrencies are likely to be valued." And on the topic of mining, Snowden asserted that the flaw in the brilliance of cryptocurrency was the failure to account for Bitcoin becoming too successful and the resulting effect of increased prices and adoption on the mining process. So that's something I totally agree with, is that Satoshi just simply, I think the whole, whoever created Bitcoin or whatever group of people just really didn't account for how successful it's actually going to be, because who would have thought? And turns out it creates quite a lot of problems, and that's why we have SegWit and Lightning Network and so on, trying to solve some of these issues that we have run into. Because in 2009, there's no way anybody was going to fill up the entire blocks of Bitcoin and, you know, overrun the block size of Bitcoin essentially because so many people using it. But 10 years later, that is definitely the case. Snowden continued, the reward for winning around once worth mere pennies, is now around $100,000, making it economically reasonable for people to divert enormous amounts of energy in data centers full of computer equipment towards the math or mining. So yeah, there was a failure in the sense that, like, hey, maybe the block sizes should have been bigger. Although that would have created bigger ledgers and more space on your computer. But those things weren't thought of beforehand, and now we have like Bitcoin Cash and SV who are trying to be more like Bitcoin originally. But there's a problem, and that if you had never updated your software, so some people think that Bitcoin Cash is more like Bitcoin originally, and it kind of is in a way, but there's one major problem with that, in that you need to move ahead in the world with technology. You can't just leave Bitcoin forever, because if too many people use it, then the fees go ridiculous, and then nobody's going to want to use it, because why would you want to pay a $30 fee just to spend $100 in Bitcoin? Nobody wants to do that. So of course technology has to move forward. It's like, that would be like having Windows 95 on your computer and never updating Windows and wondering, hey, why doesn't this work so well? Well, because humanity kind of needs to move forward. That's like saying that you're going to make a new Ford Model T that's the real Model T. You're the real Bitcoin. You're the real Model T. And you decided that just anti-lock brakes, rip them out of there. Catalytic converter, take it on out of there. Any kind of fuel consumption, fuel injection, anything like that, just get it on out of there. Let's go with the original. Problem is, you'd be going down the highway at 22 miles an hour, and causing massive accidents. So it just doesn't work. Technology needs to move ahead no matter what aspect you're looking at it, whether it's money, engineering, anything like that. Technology must move forward. So we're actually going to skip the Silk Road fake murder mystery. I don't have a lot of time today. Trying to get on in and do some live streaming or some gaming or something like that. You know what I mean? One of those days. Ohio becomes the first state to accept Bitcoin for tax payments. So this is pretty big. This is the first state that has accepted it. Now, there was some articles a while back that Arizona and I think a couple other states were considering it and voting on it. But so far, just Ohio. So starting Monday, businesses in Ohio will be able to pay their taxes in Bitcoin, making the state that's high in the middle and round on both ends the first in the nation to accept cryptocurrency officially. Companies who want to take part in the program simply need to go to ohiocrypto.com and register to pay whatever taxes their corporate hearts desire in crypto. It could be anything from cigarette sales taxes to employee withholding taxes. The brainchild of the current Ohio State Treasurer Josh Mandel, the Bitcoin program is intended to be a signal of the state's broader ambitions to remake itself a more tech-friendly image. I used to live right next to the border of Ohio in northwest Pennsylvania, and trust me, Ohio, I consider it like the second worst state in America. And trust me, I've lived in Ohio and been there. But it's incredibly boring. Nothing ever happens in Ohio. It's flatter than a pancake. There are no hills. There's nothing fun in Ohio. I know, it's unfortunate. And for anybody that lives in Ohio watching this, I'm sorry, but you know what I'm talking about. Already, Ohio has something of a technology hub forming in Columbus, home to one of the largest venture capital funds in the Midwest, Drive Capital. In Cleveland, the city once called the Mistake on the Lake, is trying to remake itself in cryptocurrency's image with a new drive to rebrand the city as Blockland. Ugh, don't do that. Whether anyone will look at to take advantage of Ohio's newfound embrace of digital currencies is debatable, but I think some people will pay their taxes in crypto. Actually, you know what? Let's do it just for you guys. Just for you guys. Let's talk about this one because I thought this was a pretty interesting article. So, Silk Road fake murder mystery may be solved. So, rather than round up a series of stories from the deep web, this week we're going to focus on just one, this tale of Silk Road. So Silk Road is a saga that just won't end, and every few months a new prosecution or a drove of freshly discovered clues adds further intrigue to the deep web's most notorious drug marketplace, which was just a terrible idea, in my opinion, to begin with. Despite the conviction of Ross Ulbricht in 2015, there remains a number of questions concerning his stewardship of Silk Road. One of the most puzzling pertains to the murder for hire charges that Ulbricht was indicted for, despite evidence showing that no assassination was ever taken place. The arrest of James Ellingson, 42, by Canadian authorities last month, however, has shed some light on the matter. If the allegations are proven true, Ulbricht was duped and defrauded multiple times by Ellingson, who operated under several pseudonyms on the Silk Road marketplace. While numerous OPSEC errors Ulbricht made would likely have led to his arrest anyway, Ellingson, or Red and White, to use one of his personas, played a pivotal role in consigning Ulbricht to life behind bars and ruining Silk Road for the thousands of buyers and sellers who had conducted business with minimal friction up until then. Again, just a super terrible idea. Like, just because it's on the dark web doesn't mean like the FBI or NSA or CIA or like anybody would be watching this. I just never thought that the Silk Road was a really great idea. I actually never even really visited the Silk Road ever, just because what a terrible idea. What a terrible idea to buy drugs over the internet. It's not a smart move. 2013, Red and White contacted Dread Pirate Roberts, DPR as Ulbricht was known, offering to solve a problem with another user, Lucy Drop. Lucy Drop was blackmailing DPR by threatening to release compromising information on thousands of Silk Road vendors, and Ulbricht consented to Red and White murdering Lucy Drop, by which point DPR had information that would lead to Red and White's arrest years later. As Canadian court documents released earlier this month, Red and White communicated with and received Bitcoin payments from Mr. Ulbricht in connection with purported attempts to begin selling narcotics on the Silk Road. A laptop recovered from Mr. Ulbricht contained a file labeled Save Red, which housed multiple photographs referenced in the communications they continued. The photographs were sent by Red and White and consisted of packaged drugs in Canadian currency. Some of the photographs showed a man in front of a building holding an envelope with a numerical code. Based on a comparative analysis with Mr. Ellingson's driver's license, authorities have identified him as the person in the photograph. So the most astonishing revelation to have emerged from this case is that Ellingson appears to have been the cause and purported solution of DPR's problems, donning many different hats to extort DPR multiple times over. As All Things Vice blog summarizes, DPR had apparently paid Bitcoin around worth $650,000 to a slick-talking shyster and opened himself up to charges of conspiracy to commit 5 new murders that had never taken place. So somebody first robbed hundreds of Silk Road customers to the tune of 6 figures in April 2012, scammed them again for a similar amount under the name Lucy Drop in 2013, then attempted to blackmail Dread Pirate Roberts with customers' address he had gathered while selling as Tony76 and Lucy Drop. So when that failed, he extracted the money out of Silk Road by pretending to be a hitman carrying out multiple murders himself and his alter egos. So given the level of deception he was up against, both from Ellingson and from law enforcement, whose chief investigation officers committed a litany of crimes, including blackmail and extortion, Ross Ulbricht never stood a chance. A few bad apples from the criminal and law enforcement fraternities were all it took to seal Ulbricht's fate. So again, the Silk Road is a pretty amazing story overall, but in case you guys didn't know, just basically this guy here, Ross Ulbricht, created the Silk Road, which was a deep web website where you could sell like anything. There was just everything on the website: drugs, narcotics, drugs, whatever. I guess it's the same thing. I think there was like guns on there. There was weapons, this, that, and the other thing. And you could just go on there and buy it with Bitcoin and then have it shipped to your house. But it was just astonishing that anybody would ship, all these drugs over just through the mail to your house, which is just a terrible idea. I have no idea how anybody thought that they would get away with that for very long. It's just like drugs literally going through the postal service eventually is going to get caught. If you were to have come up to me and ask me, hey, what about this website? What do you think about this? Like, this is the stupidest idea I've ever heard. Like, you're going to get caught, like, real fast. But I guess it took a few years for him to get caught, so I don't know. Either way, I hope you guys enjoyed this. Again, we're at 4,000 now, but for how long? I can literally do a refresh here.